Welcome to Prison Professors. My name is Michael Santos, and today I get to communicate with two high school students, Anna and is it Julissa?
Julissa.
Julissa.
Yes.
Okay, so welcome, Anna and Julissa. How did you both hear about Prison Professors, and why did you guys reach out?
Well, we're taking a theology course at the moment, and basically it's like more of a philosophy course. So we're like learning about like a lot of like moral and ethical problems generally through the whole year. And for our final project, we were asked to choose like a specific social or like community problem and research on it. So our project is incarceration and recidivism rates and how rehabilitation can help decrease those.
Well, I really hope that I can help. How did you find Prison Professors?
Um, like just your name came up through our research. We were just looking because we have to conduct a couple of interviews. So just when we were looking for like who would be a good person to
People
interview.
who've been in prison a long time? Well, I certainly can check that box. Um, but I'm really grateful for this opportunity to share with you and your classmates and your school. And I'm glad that you reached out. And I will also be sending this, sharing it with people in prison to kind of show them, hey, this is what advocacy in real life looks like. It's helping people who don't understand the system get to know more about the system. So I'll have you guys have not spoken. You haven't given me any questions yet, right? In advance.
No.
So I don't know what you're going to ask me, but we'll have some ground rules. And there's nothing you can't ask me about my time before prison, during prison, or what I've done since I've come home from prison, because this is really what our mission is all about. Is helping more people understand how can we improve outcomes for people who go through the criminal justice system. So with that, I'm going to turn it over and make myself completely accessible to any questions you may have.
Just to start off, I guess, can you just like tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Michael Santos. I was a guy who made some really bad decisions when I was about your age. I didn't pay attention to my teachers or my parents so well. And by the time I was 20 years old, I think I was 20 years old, I started going down a bad path. And that bad path, I would say it began, when I say a bad path, that means I started trafficking in cocaine, selling cocaine. It really began when I was perhaps in the 7th grade or the 8th grade, and bless you. About 7th or 8th grade, when I started associating with people that were also going down the bad path, and the friends that we choose can sometimes influence what we go through. So I wasn't a great student in high school. I didn't take my education seriously. When I graduated, but with mediocre grades. And by the time I was 20, I was pursuing a path of selling cocaine in an effort to try and avoid problems with the law. I hired people to do it for me, other kids from school, and that made me even more vulnerable to law enforcement and a more serious crime. So there was no violence in my case, but the quantity of cocaine and the seriousness of the offense resulted in me getting a 45-year prison sentence. So I got a 45-year prison sentence in 1987, and then I served 26 years in federal prison. And my whole journey through prison was all focused on what can I do to atone and make amends and reconcile with society. And I'm going to share all of that with you. But that's basically what I wanted to. That's my background.
Okay, perfect. You guys can start with that. Okay, so for the first one, it's like about your personal experience and like system insight. So can you describe what rehabilitation looked like during your time in prison, and were there any programs that made a meaningful impact on your personal development?
So I started, when I got arrested, I was locked in something called solitary confinement. So for the first year of my prison term, it's called the hole, but it's just a solitary cell. So I didn't have opportunities to go to classes or learn during that period of time. What I did have was the Bible. And I would read the Bible every day. And I came across some stories that really inspired me and convinced me not right away, but by the time I was convicted, I began learning from like the parable of the talents, or the prodigal son. And it helped me start to think about, what can I do while I'm in here to make amends and become better? And then I started reading philosophy. And I know that you're studying something similar to philosophy. I don't know if you've read Socrates, but that book had a really profound influence on my life. And it helped me focus not on the problems that I was going through, but rather, what could I do to make atone? What could I to make amends, or to atone, or to reconcile? And that helped me start changing the way that I think. And I decided to put this plan together. And it was, while I'm in prison, I'm going to focus on getting an education. I'm going to focus on contributing to society in meaningful, measurable ways. And I'm going to focus on building a support network. And that's what I was going to do. I intended to do all the way through my prison journey. And that path led to me reaching out to colleges and trying to find universities where I could go to school. And so I got a bachelor's degree in the first few years, and then I got a master's degree in prison, and then I became an author and started writing books. And I've built my whole life around lessons I learned while serving 9,500 days in prison.
Do you, like, follow-up question, do you feel like getting an education and like atoning was generally like encouraged for the other prisoners, or do you feel like that was something that you really like brought on for yourself?
No, it was something that I got inspired to do by reading Socrates and also Frederick Douglass. Do you know Frederick Douglass? Either of you?
The name sounds familiar. Yeah.
So Frederick Douglass is kind of famous because he was born during the time of slavery. And he lived his first 20 years being an enslaved person. And then he escaped. And when he escaped from slavery, I remember reading this biography, when he escaped from slavery, he didn't go on to just live his own life. He wanted to do something to make things better for all the people he left behind. And in order to do that, he had to get an education. So he had to learn how to write, learn how to read, learn how to communicate. And then he became very powerful as a communicator. And he had a very big role in what's called the abolition of slavery, ending slavery. Even though he wasn't a politician or a powerful person, he could use his life story to change. And that's what inspired me. I wanted to use my life story to change. But in order to do that, I also would have to learn to read and write. That's what pushed me to want to get an education, was reading about leaders.
Okay. And then our next question is, in your view, what are the biggest misconceptions the public has about people in prison and their ability to change?
I think the biggest misconception people have about people in prison is more about the system. The many people in society believe that locking people in a cage is the right response. But that's really not the result that we want as a society, in my view. All right. That's a process. That locking people in prison is a process. And people have a misconception that says that's the result. Let's give them a long prison sentence, where what they should be doing is saying, what can we do to make people who have broken the law law-abiding citizens? Because by locking them in cages for long periods of time, all we're doing is building intergenerational cycles of recidivism. And it's primarily afflicting people of color and poor people. And so this cycle goes on and on and on because we're focused on the wrong thing, locking people in prison. That's not the result. That doesn't get us what we want. What we want are people to live as good citizens, contributing citizens. And to do that, we should rethink the way that we are operating our prison system. And that's one big misconception I think people have, is that they just want to say, give them a long sentence. Well, that should be a process. We should focus on the result.
Now we have questions about rehabilitation programs. And
Okay.
this first one is, what elements do you believe are essential for an effective prison rehabilitation program?
I think that we should have an effective rehabilitation program. We should have the same kind of of programs that each of you have. Before we started our interview, I asked, what did you want to do with your life? And one said, I want to be a doctor, and one said, I wanted to be a teacher. Well, in order to reach those goals, you have to work really hard. You have to get good grades in school now. Then you have to get into a great college. Then you have to perform well in college. Then you have to earn credentials and get certified. And all those are incremental steps. But what's happening along the way is they're incentivizing a pursuit of excellence, right? You're both working hard because you know you need the credentials. The problem with prisons is that they do not incentivize excellence. Instead, they say, oh, your sentence is, let's just say, 10 years. And when they say your sentence is 10 years, that's what they focus on. Just serve 10 years, regardless if that person becomes a physician or a philosopher or a writer or a successful person, he's still serving 10 years. There's nothing he can do to change things. That is a flawed system. So to get the rehabilitation the way we want it, we have to make it more like the real world, and the real world incentivizes excellence.
Thank you.
I feel like you kind of answered this one with your last response, but from your experience, why do so many current prison rehabilitation programs fail to reduce recidivism?
They fail because they don't focus on the right thing. What we should be focusing on is helping people develop skills and credentials that will make them more likely to succeed when they come home. And I don't simply mean just staying out of prison. I mean, people should be successful so that they can rise to their highest potential, meaning they should be able to qualify to earn a very good income if they're qualified to do so. They should be able to become a homeowner. They should be able to develop all of the assets and resources that make somebody a whole citizen. The problem is that when people come out of prison, they may have gone through rehabilitation programs, but they didn't get ready for prime time. They don't know how to function in society. They know how to live in prison, but they don't know how to function out here. And so the rehabilitation programs that we offer in prison should focus on making people ready for the job market, ready for success, and then also changing the way people think. Because the prison system conditions people to think in such a way that the longer they spend in prison, the less likely they are to function outside. And that's what contributes to high recidivism, in my view.
How important are education and vocational training in rehabilitation, and what barriers exist to implementing them widely, in your opinion?
Education and vocational programs are the most important part of a rehabilitation program. They're important because they can help a person start developing confidence and believe that he can live as a law-abiding, contributing citizen with dignity and with an opportunity to prosper and provide for his family or her family and build a life. The big threat to it is that many of the people in prison have been conditioned by failure, and they don't understand the relationship between getting an education and their prospects for success. So many people in prison, they don't take education seriously, but the system doesn't incentivize them to do so. So the people in prison are not people like each of you. They're not people a lot of times that focused on school and advancing themselves. They dropped out of school, okay? Many of the people in prison never even finished high school. And so they've never really had a career or a job, and they don't go to prison and all of a sudden start thinking, geez, let me be a great student. It would be awesome if they did, but not everybody reads Socrates and the Bible and Frederick Douglass while they're starting in prison. Instead, they learn how to live in prison, and those are skills that we don't want people to have.
I'm gonna answer that. Yeah. This one? Oh yeah. Okay. Do you believe that reentry success is more influenced by what happens inside prison or by the support available after the release?
I think it's dependent. I think reentry success is mostly dependent upon an individual's ability and commitment to live as a law-abiding citizen. The prison system, in my experience, did not incentivize people to do that. And that's a tragic flaw. So for somebody to succeed upon release, they've got to expect to face enormous obstacles, challenges, and complications. And they have to find a way to succeed anyway. And the way they do that is by starting by defining success. They've got to know what they want. Each of you know what you want. One wants to be a physician, one wants to be a teacher. So you know what you have to study. If a person goes through prison and the only thing he's thinking about is getting out, well, when he gets out, he's going to be in an entirely new prison because there won't be a job waiting for him. He may not have a house. He may not have a support system. But most importantly, he doesn't know how to get it. And that is a flaw. He's starting with a very big handicap that he might not even understand how to overcome.
That's all the question.
So, like, yeah, but like what you were saying about how, like nothing prepares them to like have like a goal for when they get out other than their goal being getting out. How do you think, or like, how could prisons better prepare incarcerated individuals to have a plan?
Well, they could do it the same way that your teachers are preparing you to get ready for college. You know that you've got to take an SAT class at some point to get into college. Then if you're going to go to grad school, you're going to have to take the graduate records examination. In order to do well on those, you have to go through the process of studying English and math and philosophy and biology for the physician, and all these different things. You know what you have to do. Well, that's the same thing that should happen in prison. In prison, we should create a mechanism that it pushes a person along a very clear path that leads to success. And the individual has to have buy-in on that. So if you look at the prisonprofessors.org website, you see that I try to show them how to do it. I publish every day. I'm going to publish this video. I'm going to share it with them in prison. I'm going to say, you see, I want to change the law. How am I going to change the law? Well, I'm going to get all these brilliant students at this particular high school to learn about prison. Maybe some of them are going to grow up and go to college and be a social scientist. And they're going to say, oh, I want to change the law because I remember seeing this guy who did time in prison and he's changing it. I think we should do those kinds of things, right? It's these little steps that we always should be sowing seeds today for the fruit we want to eat, 3 years from now. So that is what I think we fail at in society, is we do not help people in prison see what can I do to lead a meaningful, relevant life when I get out of here.
Done. Okay. Yeah. This one's about like advice for young advocates and students. So what advice do you have for students and young people who want to make a difference in criminal justice reform?
I think that is a great question to reach out to students who want to be a part of this. I would say they should go to prisonprofessors.org and offer to be an intern, a volunteer, and help me spread this awareness on what's wrong with prison. And if anybody wants to do that in your class, they should find a worthwhile nonprofit volunteer organization and say, well, how can I help? And there's a lot of ways that can help. I mean, right now there's social media that we need a lot of people sharing the message so that people who aren't thinking about prison, we need to wake them up and help them see this is one of the great social injustices of our time. We incarcerate more people than any other country on the planet. It's mostly people of color, and their children suffer. They become more likely to go to prison. And it's like the slavery of our era. And in order to change that, we need to get a lot of people involved. So if some of your students see this and they want to volunteer, have them visit prisonprofessors.org. We'd love to have them as a volunteer. But if they want to go someplace else, I just encourage them to find a worthwhile organization.
Thank you.
And then what's one thing people can do right now to help support effective rehabilitation efforts in their own communities?
Again, I would encourage people to be a part of the movement, to be heard, to let the world know we can do better. In the same way that Frederick Douglass worked to abolish slavery. You see, Frederick Douglass recognized that if I'm going to change these laws that enslave human beings, I've got to help people understand what's wrong with it. Because people don't even know that it's wrong, okay? But something's wrong when we in the United States incarcerate more people than any other nation, and we need to do something to change that. And as Mahatma Gandhi said, we want to be the change. We should be the change that we want to see in the world. So if somebody wants to do something about it, I hope they find a worthwhile nonprofit and volunteer, and it will look great on a college application.
That's the end of our prepared questions, but I have a follow-up question just because this is for our theology class and you mentioned the Bible. Could you talk like a little more about like the impact that the Bible had on you, like I
Sure.
guess finding your path?
So when I started, I started inside, as I said, a solitary cell, and the only thing that was in there was a Bible. And I grew up going to Catholic school for the first, I think I was until the fifth grade. I moved into the fifth grade, but first grade through fifth grade, I went to Catholic school. I was the altar boy, and but I wasn't very religious. You know, it was, and when I went to prison, I'm in a solitary cell that you've only got a Bible, you start reading it. And, you know, the first story in Genesis is the story of Joseph. And, you know, he's locked in prison, but he changes and he comes up with this whole concept of it was 7 years of feast and 7 years of famine. And I remember that inspiring me. That was one story that inspired me. But I would just keep reading from the book of Genesis all the way through the Old Testament, all the way into the New Testament. And one of them that made a really big impact on me was called the parable of the talents. I think it was in the book of Mark or the book of Matthew. And that story, if you don't know it, told the story of a master who had 3 servants, and he was going on a trip, and he told the 3 servants, okay, a talent, think of a talent as like a money, some kind of money, to put in modern terms. And he said to the first talent, I'm going to be on a trip here. I'm going to leave you with 10 talents, and I want you to take care of them for me while I'm gone. And he said to the second servant, I'm going to give you 5 talents, and I want you to take care of them for me when I'm gone. And the third servant, he said, I'm going to give you 1 talent and take care of it while I'm gone. And the master was gone for a period of time. And when he came back, he came to see his servants. And he said to the big first one, well, I'm back. How did you do with my talents? And he said, Master, I know that you're a man who works hard and you sow seeds and you look for something in the future. And you gave me 10 talents and I invested them. And now I've got 20 talents. And here's the 10 talents that you gave me and 10 more talents. And the master said, you've done very well. And he went to the second talent, the second servant, and he said, how did you do? And he said, your master, I did really well. I took this, I did this. Here's the 5 talents you gave me, and I earned 5 more talents, and here you go. Excellent, you've done very well. And he went to the third servant, and he said, how did you do? And he said, well, you gave me 1 talent, and I know that you're very stern, and I didn't want to lose it, so I just buried it in the ground, and here's your 1 talent. And the master said, you are a wicked servant, and you've done terrible, and I'm going to not only take your talent, I'm going to give it to the one who gave the 10. And the message that I got from that was that God rewards those who invest in themselves. If you work hard, God is going to bless you with abundance. If you don't work hard, God is not only going to not bless you, but he's going to take away from you what you have. That's what I got out of the Bible. Any other questions?
No, that's all the questions we had.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate your interest in prison professors, and I wish both of you enormous success in your future.
Yeah, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.